You didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because they still had potential. The job wasn't wrong. The relationship wasn't broken. The idea wasn't bad, but none of it was quite there yet, and that gap is where you live. That gap is where you've always lived. And here's what no one has told you. You're not hopeful. You're hooked. You know this feeling. You stay in something longer than you should, a relationship, a career, a version of yourself, not because it's good. Because it could be. You see what it might become. You sense the shape of the thing beneath the surface. And you believe, genuinely believe, that if you just give it more time, more energy, more patience, it will arrive. The potential will actualize. The person will change, the project will click, the future version of you will finally show up, so you wait. And while you wait, you invest, you rationalize, you explain it to yourself. You say, I see something in this, I'm not a quitter. And in a world that worships persistence, that sounds like wisdom. It isn't. It's the most sophisticated form of avoidance you've ever built. Here's the twist. Potential doesn't live in the future. It lives in your imagination, and your imagination is not neutral. It is biased, it is motivated, and most critically, it is yours. When you see potential in something, you are not seeing the thing. You are seeing a story you've already written, a projection. And projections feel real because they originate inside you. They carry the weight of your desire. Erich Fromm wrote in The Art of Loving, not a person, but an image. Love is often nothing but a favorable exchange between two people who get the most of what they can expect, considering their value on the personality market. Erich Fromm, The Art of Loving, you don't fall in love with people. You fall in love with who you imagine they could become. And then you spend years trying to close the distance between the image and the reality. That distance is not hope. That distance is the addiction. To understand why this happens, you need to understand one thing about your brain. It runs on prediction, not reality. Neuroscientist Anil Seth calls this controlled hallucination. Your brain is not a camera. It is a prediction engine. It is constantly building a model of the world based on past experience and checking that model against incoming data. What you perceive is mostly the model. Reality is just the correction signal. So when you encounter something, a person, an idea, a situation, your brain doesn't start from scratch. It retrieves the closest model it already has. And if that model is loaded with longing, with hope, with unresolved need, then what you see is not what is there. What you see is what you need to be there. Now add dopamine. Dopamine, the molecule everyone thinks is about pleasure, is actually about anticipation. Neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky is precise about this. Dopamine spikes not when you get the reward. It spikes in the moment just before, when the reward is possible, but not yet certain. That uncertainty, that maybe, is chemically intoxicating. And potential is the longest maybe in the human experience. Potential never fully arrives. That's what makes it so addictive. A person who is completely actualized holds no charge. A project that is done is just work, but something that is almost there. Something that could be with just a little more time, a little more faith. That triggers the same neural circuitry as a variable reward slot machine. You are not hoping. You are gambling. The house is your own future, but the psychology goes deeper than neurochemistry. Potential addiction is also an identity structure. Think about who you are when you're invested in someone's potential. You are the one who sees what others don't. You are the patient one, the faithful one, the visionary. You are special because your belief is special. Carl Rogers, in On Becoming a Person, described a phenomenon where people attach their self-worth to the act of believing in others. Not to the outcome, to the belief itself, because the belief makes you the kind of person you want to be. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. Carl Rogers, On Becoming a Person, you've built an identity around being the one who doesn't give up. And that identity now requires something to not give up on. The potential isn't in the other person. It's in what the other person lets you believe about yourself. There's another layer. Potential addiction is also a protection mechanism. If you commit to the present reality of something, its actual limitations, its actual shape, you risk real disappointment. But if you commit to its potential, you can always relocate the goalposts. The failure is never final. The disappointment is always deferred. It almost worked. It was so close. This is what Shelley's Aleister describes in its restless protagonist, a man who pursues a visionary ideal across the entire world, destroying everything real in the process, because the ideal, by definition, can never be caught. The pursuit is the point. The pursuit protects him from the grief of arrival. He lived, he died, he sung in solitude. Percy Bysshe Shelley, Aleister, or the Spirit of Solitude. So what actually happens? What does a life organized around potential actually look like from the inside? You accumulate starts, projects that were almost something, relationships that were almost right, versions of yourself you were almost becoming, and the starts feel like evidence of richness. Look at all I've explored, look at all I've tried. But starts without completions are not a portfolio. They are a pattern. You develop a tolerance for the present. The actual, the concrete, the here, the now starts to feel thin. Too fixed, too limited. Real things have edges, potential doesn't. And gradually, without noticing, you lose the ability to be satisfied by what is. You become constitutionally incapable of arrival. The people in your life, the ones who are who they are without the shimmer of becoming, start to bore you. Not because they're boring, because they're present. And presence no longer generates dopamine. Only potential does. Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, observed that what destroys a person is not suffering. It is suffering without meaning. But there is a quieter destruction, a life that avoids both suffering and meaning by remaining perpetually almost. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Here is the deeper thing. Potential is a story about time. It requires a future. And as long as you're living in a future that hasn't arrived, you cannot be present in a life that has. The philosopher Alan Watts described this with uncomfortable precision. He said that the Western mind has been trained to treat life as a journey toward a destination, and destinations justify the journey. So we defer, we wait, we endure the present in exchange for a future that will make it worthwhile. But life, Watts said, is not a journey, it is a musical piece. You don't listen to a symphony in order to get to the final note. You listen for what is happening now. Potential addiction is the belief that the final note will justify the rest. It won't. Because there is no final note, there is only the music that's playing. The Sufi poet Rumi in the Masnavi opens with the image of a reed cut from the reed bed, crying not from hope but from separation. Listen to this reed, how it tells a tale, complaining of separations. That separation is not something to be fixed. It is something to be inhabited. The cry is the music. The longing itself is the presence, but we are so afraid of the longing that we turn it into a project. We try to manage the ache with potential. We say, soon, almost, when it becomes, and the reed keeps crying. Listen to the reed, how it tells a tale of separation. Since I was cut from the reed bed, men and women have lamented over me. Rumi, Masnavi, Book I. Now the question changes. It's no longer, why can't they see what I see? It's, why do I need to see it? What are you getting from the potential that you can't get from the real? What does the almost protect you from? Because here is the reframe you've been waiting for without knowing it. You are not someone with high standards. You are someone with a high tolerance for incompleteness. And those are opposite things. High standards look at what is and decide whether it meets the criteria. Potential addiction looks at what isn't and decides it will eventually. High standards accept disappointment when reality doesn't match the standard. Potential addiction defers disappointment indefinitely. You have been optimizing for hope, not for truth. And the most uncomfortable part, you have done this not because you are naive, but because you are intelligent. The intelligence that constructs elaborate narratives about what something could be, that is real intelligence put in service of avoidance. James Baldwin wrote it without mercy. People are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them. The history you're trapped in is a story where potential is always just over the horizon, and the horizon moves when you do. People are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them. James Baldwin, Notes of a Native Son. The solution is not to stop believing in people. It's not to become cynical or to lower your standards or to stop caring. The shift is subtler than that. It's learning to ask a different question, not what could this become, but what is this right now and is that enough? Not as a one-time question, as a practice. A habit of returning to what is actually in front of you. Daniel Kahneman's research on what he calls the experiencing self versus the remembering self shows something quietly devastating. The part of you that actually lives your life, moment to moment, in the texture of real experience, is not the part that makes your decisions. The part that makes your decisions is the storytelling mind, the one that constructs narratives, that reads potential into things, and that mind does not have your well-being as its primary goal. It has narrative coherence as its primary goal. It wants the story to make sense, even if the story is costing you everything. The practice, then, is not analysis. It is noticing. Noticing when you are in the room and when you are in the version of the room that exists only in your mind. Noticing when you are responding to a person and when you are responding to your projection of them. Noticing when hope is grounded and when it is architecture. Beautiful, intricate, self-supporting architecture built on nothing. There is a line from Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar that has never left me. She describes her protagonist sitting under a fig tree, each fig a different life, a different future. And she is so paralyzed by the potential of each one that she cannot choose. And while she sits there choosing, all the figs, one by one, shrivel and fall to the ground. Plath wasn't writing about indecision. She was writing about potential addiction, about what happens when the act of imagining replaces the act of living. I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. Sylvia Plath, The Bell Jar, you have been the one who sees. You have been the one who believes. You have been the one who stays, and all of that is real. It is not nothing. But at some point you have to ask, what have you been staying for? The thing that exists or the thing that might? Because you cannot love potential, you can only love what is. Everything else is just the gap between you and reality dressed up as hope. The problem isn't that you believed in something that didn't come true. The problem is that you were so committed to the becoming that you never showed up for the being. And the being was there the whole time. It was just never glowing. It was just real.